Hello, Legit friends. I am super excited to jump in and get started on month one, and I hope you are too. I'm Deb Atchison, Legit Kits Certified Instructor, and I run their Certified Instructor program. And I'm super excited that we're jumping in now and we're getting started with month one. So we're going to start at my long arm, and I'm going to show you why. All right, here we are at my long arm. And the reason why we're starting here is because I always starch my fabric for a couple of reasons I'll tell you about in a second. But I use my long arm table to lay it all out and starch it and let it dry. So let's take a look at our fabric first, then we'll talk about starch, and then we'll go from there. So as we open our kit, just going to pull out the fabric and set everything else aside. So here's our fabric, and the way our fabric is organized is it's alphabetically organized by shape. So if I look at all of these small tiny pieces, they are organized alphabetically, A through whatever we have. Then we're going to start over with our alphabet with the next size piece. And then our larger pieces as well start over with A. So what I like to do to get started is I starch all of my fabric. And I do that for a reason. And the reason being are actually a couple of reasons. One, we always talk about should we wash our fabric? Well, you're not going to throw this stack of itty bitty pieces into the washing machine. But if we starch them really well, they'll do a little bit of shrinking if they're going to shrink at all. And so we don't have to worry about our quilted project. Once it's quilted, is it going to shrink and not look good? The other reason why I like to starch is it gives us a little bit of weight to our fabric and a little bit of stiffness to the fabric so that when I'm sewing with it, it just sews better, in my opinion. So you can use any kind of starch that you like. Acorn, and you guys have heard of their products, I'm sure, and their Acorn pressing pen. They have their own pressing solution, and they have this nifty, cool little sprayer. And mine needs to be charged. I'm not going to use it right now. My favorite actually is the Magic Quilting and Crafting Spray. And it is from the Thoughtless folks, but it's dedicated for what we do. And this is my favorite. And I'm running out of my aerosol can. So I also have it in my continuous spray bottle here. So I'm going to lay it out. I'm going to show you first of all. And I always just put down towels so that I can spray all over it and I don't mess up my long arm or anything like that. So let me just show you. If I move all of this away, and I used to take off my labels and then starch it and put my label back on, and that really became a pain. And I don't end up using my whole piece of fabric anyway, so I just spray it down with the label on it. I've not ever had a problem. It hasn't run. The ink doesn't get on my iron, all those kinds of things. But if you feel better, you can turn it over to the back and spray the back side as well. So I'm just going to do what I normally do, but I want you to take a close look. I'm going to see if I can zoom in a little bit. And I just want you to watch the fabric and see if you notice any shrinking as I start to starch it. I noticed a little bit there. I didn't really notice a lot like I normally do, of course, because I'm showing you on video. I lay all my fabric down and I soak it really well with starch. And this looks like it didn't get any, but there's a whole pool of starch right here. So let me just do this like I normally do, and we'll speed it up and you can see that whole process. Right, so my fabric's all laid out, and now I'm just going to spray it down and soak it all the way through. So now these larger pieces, I'm getting too close to my long arm for my comfort. So I'm just going to take my larger pieces and just lay them over the top bar of my long arm, and then I'll move some others down and finish spray starching. All right, so all my fabric is starched. I'm just going to leave it here on the long arm and let it dry. If you were in a really big hurry, you could press it with your iron, but I'm just gonna let it dry and we're gonna go back over to my sewing setup and I'm gonna show you what we do next. So let's take a look at what else we have in our packet for month one. Once you pull out the rest of the paperwork, you'll see on this front page that this section we're working on for month one, we have these two blocks, will be size 7.5 by 20 when we are done, have 41 colors and 80 pieces in this section. So a perfect one to get started on. Okay. When you turn that over, you've got your inspiration photo that we mentioned in the last video. So you'll have this to see what you are working towards your final product. And we have a list of all of the blocks that we are working on. And we are starting with, let me just make sure. Yes, we are starting with A1 and A2. So these are the two blocks we're working with for month one. This will be your inspiration. So these bolded blocks up here are the two that we're about to create. And then again, we have pattern side, and over here I showed you the quilt side. So these are two blocks. This is the pattern side. So this is what it's going to look like on our pattern side of the blocks. And then this is what the finished quilt will be looking like. So we can set all of those guys aside. Then you're going to have your color sheet. So this tells you all the colors that are in your kit and how much we have of each one. We really don't need that now. It comes in handy when you are wanting to swap out colors or you are wanting to put file folders together and save your extra scrap. So we're just going to set that aside. Same thing with our fabric list by code. Okay. The next thing, if you recall, we have our assembly guides. We're going to set these aside because we don't need these until all of our pieces are finished. Until our pieces are done, we don't have anything to assemble. So we'll set those aside. And then the next sections of papers are what we're going to use. We're going to look at each sheet of fabric also has a cut guide. Now, this is not to scale, and I don't use these necessarily as I have to cut this piece of material from this corner, but I will show you what I use them for as we go through the process. So just hold tight with me and I'll walk you through that. Okay, so I'm going to pull all of these apart. And the next thing we have are pattern pieces. So we're going to get all of these two things, our pattern pieces and our cut guides, organized and ready to go. Now there's lots of ways of doing this. Some people use file folders. I started out that way. Some people use binders and they have a sleeve in here for every color with the fabric and the cut guide. And I started doing that. I still do that for demonstration purposes for class, but that's not how I function on a daily basis because I got tired of reaching in these pockets. As you can see, it's sometimes hard to open them. So I got tired of reaching in here and grabbing the fabric every time I needed it. So what I use now is something called an office alphabetizer. And I mentioned this to you in the first video, our introduction video. And so this is what we're going to do now is we're going to organize all of our cut guides and all of our pattern pieces behind whatever letter they belong. So our cut guides are easy. AD, we're going to cut that apart and we're going to stick it behind letter A. Okay, so let's go ahead and do our cut guides first. So this first page has two sections on it, fabric AC, fabric AD. And really, they're going to go behind the same letter so I could keep them as one piece. But notice fabric AC has, 7 different pieces of fabric, and fabric AD only has one. And if I'm wanting to clear things out as I'm done with them, it doesn't work for me to put this whole sheet in there. So what I'm going to do is cut apart AC from AD. And I want you to be careful. This little list of AC numbers here, that goes with AC fabric. So I just have a rotary cutter that I put my old blades in that are dull. And I use that. I just say, hey, that's for paper only. So I'm going to cut these all apart, and you can do that with me as well. Pause the video, cut yours apart, and then we'll pick up from there in just a second. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be straight. You don't have to use a ruler. If you want to, of course you can, but you don't have to. We're just really cutting it apart. So I'm going to cut ACAD, and I'm going to take them and put them behind my letter A. So I'm going to grab letter A, open it, shove it behind. It's ready to go. Okay. Now, usually I will have this off to the side and we'll be organizing at the same time as I'm cutting, but you could cut them all and then organize them all. Okay, so that's probably what I'm going to do just for space. And you may be asking, well, why isn't she just cutting several at a time? I don't want to cut several at a time because some of them have these little letters that we're going to use and some of them don't. So I don't want to accidentally cut something off that shouldn't be. And this one's a whole sheet, so I don't really have to cut it off. All right, so now what I'm going to do is file these all behind their relative letters. So let me get this guy open over here. And I'm going to start at the back because I stacked them in reverse alphabetical order. So anything that has a X, a Y, or a Z, it's going to go in this page. We just have one. Then W, I'm going to look for anything with a W. I don't have any. I have a Y, sorry. That goes behind the Y. UV, I've got a V. Now I'm going to take all of my T's. You guys can't see that over here. Let's do it this way. You guys can see what's going on that way. There we go. All right, so all the T's, I'm going to take all those T's. We're going to go right here behind the letter T. And I'm just throwing them in there. They don't have to be beautiful. Not a problem. Same thing with my S's. I'm going to just keep going like this. So go ahead and organize yours this way as well. While I'm doing this, actually, let me get through these first. So you can see P and Q go together, and a lot of times there's a lot of Q's in here. So this R got left out. So I'm going to grab all of my P's, all of my Q's. I'm going to put those behind PQ. And then we also have another letter that's combined in an O. So I'm going to grab all of my N's and O's, stick them in alphabetical order. There's quite a few of those as well. I don't know about you, but you ever had to sing the alphabet to yourself when you're organizing? If it's just me, please don't just tell me. All right, so let's see. These are all my N's and my O's, so I'm going to stick them in there, and then I'm going to continue this process. So the reason why I switched to an alphabet organizer, I actually learned this from Verushka with Pride and Joy Quilting, is for several reasons. Some I learned from her, some I just kind of figured out kind of on my own. But what I really like about using the alphabetizer is that it's easier to get to content that I need. And you're going to see that in a minute when we get started, that it's just easier to flip through this than it is a binder and stick my hands in the sleeves or use a file folder. And now I still use file folders to store all my scraps. But it's just easier for me to use this alphabetizer. So and you'll see as we get going, it may work for you, it may not work for you. And if it doesn't, I'm not going to be offended. But if you have one or access to one, give it a try because I think you might find it's pretty helpful. All right. So these are all of my cut guides. So they're all in behind the alphabetical order. So now let me get all this other stuff away. Sometimes I will take all this extra papers and stick it in a small little binder or folder. But I'm just going to be honest with you. Last few quilts, I've just been sticking it back in their plastic sleeve and setting it aside until I need those pieces. So that's what I'm going to do for now. But if you want to have it all nice and neat, you can organize it in your plastic sleeves, kind of like I've done here. It does make it nice and it's very pretty, but for now, I'm just not going to do that. Just gonna be honest with you guys. All right, now I'm gonna set this aside and we're going to cut apart all of our pattern pieces. So when we cut apart our pattern pieces, we don't want to cut right on the line. We're gonna need all of this gray part. This is our seam allowance. It's going to be very, very important. So when I'm cutting these pieces, I'm really just cutting them apart to separate them because we put several on a sheet so we don't have just one on a page. So really, I just make sure I have one sheet here and I'm just roughly going to cut this. Now, if you wanted to cut a little extra, you can, but you don't have to be super precise. Okay? And I know some of you are like, the quoting is precise. Yes, it is. But you don't have to get out your ruler and measure this because guess what? You're going to cut all this stuff off later. You just really want to rough cut it so that you have it separated because we're going to work with one segment of our block at a time. So I'm going to cut all these apart, set them aside, and then I'll show you what we do next. Right. So that's it. 6 pages of pattern pieces. How many did it say we have here? 80 pieces. So we've cut apart our 80 pieces, and then we can do one of two things. If you're still waiting, look at my fabric. It still looks pretty wet. If you're waiting on your fabric to dry, then you can go ahead and fold all of these sew lines. So all of these thin little lines are sew lines. That's the line we're going to actually sew on. So you can fold them now to make life a little bit easier for you down the road. So we can do that and then file them, or we can not fold them, file them in our alphabetizer, and then when we get to the piece, fold them. But since my starch is still wet over on my pieces on the long arm, I'm going to go ahead and fold these. So give me a second to grab my folding tools and I'll show you how we do that. All right, let's get started. If you have one of these Legit Kits flip and fold rulers, maybe you picked one up to cut a handful of them at a quilt show, maybe you picked one up from him, you can use it. My personal favorite is using an at a quarter plus ruler, and the at a quarter plus we're going to use in lots of things. It has a little lip right here, so it's going to catch onto our fabric and let us trim a quarter of an inch. So we'll use that a little bit later. But if you get the one that says plus on it, that actually has a slanted section, and that's what I prefer to use the most on. That's what I'm going to use now, but you can use anything. Some people use the don't panic card that's in there kit. Some people use cardboard. Some people use whatever you want to use. This works for me. So what we're going to do is we're going to place our ruler or whatever tool of your choice on that little line. Some people actually score it with a henna marker or something like that. You can do that as well, but this is what I do. I lay it on my line. I fold it over so that I'm creasing on the line, and then I just take my ruler and make a sharp little crease. Okay, so that's folded there. Now you're folding toward the inside. So folding towards the pattern, and you'll see why when we get to preparing our pieces. So I folded that line. I'm going to do the same thing here on this line. We'll talk about what all these other things on the pattern mean in just a moment when we get to that. I'm just kind of a let's do it as we go along person. So I'm folding on all of these lines, made a nice little crease in all of them. I'll be able to easily fold on any of these lines. Now, some people will fold them back and forth, and you can do that. That works too. Some people will use just their fingernails and fold it on the line and then fold crease it. Whatever works for you. We just want to fold on these lines. Okay. So I'm going to fold on all of these lines and then we'll do the next step. And it doesn't matter what order you fold in because we're going to fold on all of the lines. So it does not matter. Just fold every single line on every single one of your 80 pieces. So this is a great thing to do while we let that fabric starch dry. If you're not 100% on the line, if it wavers a little bit, this step, it doesn't matter. So don't feel like, oh, I'm a tiny bit off on the line. Let me refold. Close is good. On the line as best as possible. But if your ruler slipped and you're a little bit off, it's not going to be a huge deal in this step. So just keep on folding, keep on folding, keep on folding. All right, and our last piece. See, that didn't take too long, even in real time. Sometimes if I'm doing a larger kit, I might not fold all the papers to start with. Or I might take out some in the car if I'm not the driver and fold them while I'm doing that. But we've got all our papers folded. Every single line of all our 80 pieces is folded. So I'm going to stop and go check on that fabric and see if it's dry over on the long arm. Right, our pattern pieces are folded, our fabric is all dry. And so what I've done with my fabric is I've stacked it all in alphabetical order, no matter what size the fabric is. So it's all in ABC order. And now what I'm going to do is take my fabric first, file it in my alphabetizer behind the letter it goes. So this is A, C, and AD. I'm going to grab both of those fabrics, stick it behind the A, flip on over to B. I do have a B fabric, so I'll place it here. Flip to C. I've got one C, etc. And I'm going to keep on going all the way through this until I get through all of my fabrics sorted in my alphabetizer. Oops, this little guy is in the wrong place. These books are in the wrong place. Let's stick them where they go. All these are in the wrong place. There we go. And a lot of different N's and O's here. Sometimes I space them out where I can see them, sometimes I don't. But those are all our fabrics behind N and O. PQ. Oops, nope, that's not all. I got these O's. So let me flip back over. I've got a few more O's to add to the collection. So lots of fabrics this time behind N and O. And then this would be P and Q. So lots of P's, Q's. Go here. So now I've got all my fabric sorted behind its relative letters, and I'm ready to move on to the pattern pieces. So let's talk about the anatomy of a pattern piece. This is one segment that's going to go together with several other segments to make one block. But all of our segments, all of our units, all of our pieces, whatever you want to call it, all have the same marking. So we've already talked about this gray outline around the edge of our piece. That is our seam allowance. It's very important that we don't ever cut that off. So we're going to need that. We have talked about folding on these lines. These thin lines are going to be our sew lines. And so initially, we need to know what piece we're starting with and what's our second piece and so on. And so these circles here tell us. So this piece right here of my segment, this piece right here that has the 1 and the ON on it, that is my very first piece. And so that's the piece we're going to start with first. So these numbers are really important. This 1, 2, 3, 4, that tells me what order to sew my pieces in. And we want to sew it in the order that it's listed here so that everything goes together well, our points meet up, and everything looks beautiful when we're done. The next thing you're noticing, like on piece 1, it says ON. That's our fabric color. So if I flip over here to my O's, I'm going to find a fabric called ON. So this is Riley Cotton Confetti, but the name of the Riley fabric is Royal Blue. But the code that Legit Kits has given it is this ON. So anytime this blue piece of fabric right here is used anywhere in our kit or any other kit, it's always going to have this code. So the nice thing about that is if you have extra fabric left over, you can use it. So you may have some of this left over for next month and you might want to use it instead of cutting into your new piece of fabric. Or when you're done with this kit and you have leftover fabric because Legit gives you more than enough, more than what you need to complete your kit. So if you make mistakes, it's okay. You probably have enough to cover it. So you could always save your scraps and then use them in another kit. All right. So our first piece is ON. Our second piece would be RQ for number 2 and number 3. And then piece number 4 is the QC. So the way I do this is I take this piece and I file it behind the letter for the very first piece. I don't worry about 2, 3, 4. I don't worry about any of that. I'm going to find number 1. Number 1 is ON. So I'm going to flip to my O's. And I'm going to stick it back here. And I just put my pieces on top of the fabric. I don't try to match it up at that time. So like this was tucked away back here somewhere. I just leave it there and I throw my pattern piece in here and I don't worry about it. Okay? But there is one other thing we've not talked about the anatomy of your pattern piece yet. And that's this larger circle. This is A to D. That means it's going to be on row A, the top row of our quilt, and it's going to be on block number 2. So, one second. So first, let's look at this larger pattern. For this whole entire kit, we have 16 blocks. So we have 4 rows by 4. So this piece that I'm looking here, A, tells me it's on row A. So I know it's going to be up here somewhere. The 2 tells me what block of row A this is going to be on. So A2. And then this little letter D tells me it's part D. And that's going to make sense more a little bit later. It's actually kind of right here, somewhere in this portion of our block. But we don't have to worry about that right now. We'll worry about that more when we start putting all the pieces together. But just for your general information, this A2D tells me it's on row A, column 2, and it's somewhere in this block. And then when I look here at A2, this is block A2, I can see here's RQ, QC, ON. So it's somewhere right in this vicinity is where this piece is going to rest on the block. So just to give you all the anatomy of the pieces. So again, seam line, seam allowance, sew line, sew order, where it falls in the whole kit, and then these letters are the letter code for our fabric. Okay. All right. So now we got anatomy out of the way. Let's get on to the fun part so we can get on to the really fun part, which is the sewing. So I'm going to file this behind ON. Okay. Then you can close this up and take a look at your next piece. So let's do a couple of these together and then I'll just let you continue on. So this, I'm looking for number 1. Number 1 is LW. So I don't have to open my whole book. I can just come here, find the L, flip it open, throw it in, and I'm good to go. That piece is kind of sticking out a little bit. Let me scoop those over. All right, next piece. Where's number 1? Do you see it? Right here, number 1 is OH. So I'm going to come back here to my N and my O, flip it open, drop it in, move right along. Number 1 on this piece is way over here. TQ. I'm going to flip to my T's right here, open it up, throw it in. Okay? And that's what we're going to do for the rest of our 80 pieces. So all total of our 80 pieces are going to go in this alphabetizer on top of the fabric. A lot of O's. What? When we get to those O's, we're going to be busy. All right, that's it. So filed away inside our alphabetizer are our cut guide, our fabric pieces, and our pattern pieces. So now this is ready to go. You can pick it up, set it aside when you're not using it. If you're going to retreat or something, just grab the sucker, take it with you. And people ask, well, is stuff going to fall out? Well, yeah, if I'm rough with it, probably so. Or if you're presenting at a quilt guild and you just drop it, wow. So sometimes if I'm traveling, I may tuck this inside, one of those zip up pouches or something. But for generally working here at my sewing machine, this just sits off to the side. And when I'm ready to tackle the next step, then it's all there ready for me. So let's do that. Let's tackle the next step. Right, finally, we are ready to get started with our first piece, our first pattern piece, and our first fabric. So what I do is I flip open to my first letter A, and look, we do have a piece here that has some fabric A. So what fabric does it have? AD. So I'm going to flip over my AC. I don't need that. I'm going to grab my AD fabric, and I'm going to be honest. Half the time, I don't pay a lot of attention to the cut guides. They are super useful for lots of things. For instance, this tells me it would be best to cut out my piece somewhere up here in this corner. But I don't necessarily follow where the piece is. I follow, though, am I on the right fabric and the right piece? So let's take a look at that. So on this piece, this is piece A 2I, and it's fabric AD. So I have fabric AD and I have the cut guide for fabric AD. And if we look at the bottom of this, it tells me A2I, and in parentheses, that lets me know it's piece number 1. So this tells me down here at the bottom that piece A2I is going to be number 1 on this cut guide, this piece right here. Now this is super easy. We have one piece. So that's going to be easy. So I know A2I, this piece, A2I, I can know that I'm on the right piece of fabric, and I can then mark this off because I'm doing this piece. So I'm going to cross off A2I. And if you want to reuse these cut guides again, you're getting a different pattern, you're going to make this quilt again, then you can always do this in a friction pan and iron it off. I'm probably not going to make this quilt again. If I do, I'm going to buy the full kit. So I'm going to have everything that I need. So I just mark it off with a pen. Don't worry about it. Okay. Now, because this is the only piece, when I'm done with this fabric, I am done. So I can take it out of my book because I don't need it anymore. Okay. So let me show you what I do with the first piece. The first piece, I always say, is like the first child. And I'm the first child in my family, the first of 5. So it's okay for me to say this. They're kind of treated with hand gloves, right? Oh, don't go outside. Don't play in the dirt. Don't eat the dirt. Second kid comes along. Go wash your hands. Third kid comes along. Oh, they're eating dirt. It's no big deal, right? So our first piece of our pattern is treated very specially like our very first child. And so we kind of treat it differently than all the other pieces. So let me show you what we're going to do. I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm going to take my cut guide out because this will be my last piece. I'm just going to set that aside. Got my fabric and my pattern piece. And set this aside for a moment. And I have probably almost every light board that Color Killer makes. And this is the large ultra one. It sits by my machine. I have one that I travel with that is smaller. And then somewhere around here, I have a little bitty small one too. And I really like that one because it's a perfect size for Legit Kits. The problem is it doesn't have a clear mat like this. It has a mat with all the lines. And so I still use it. It's still really nice, but I can't wait for them to make a mat like this that is no line. So right now, all I have to worry about is getting this section, this little piece of this segment cut out of AD. And I'm only worrying about piece number 1. I'm not worrying about anything else right now. So some people like pens, some people like glue. Here's my problem with glue sticks. I would take the lid off and forget to put the lid back on and then waste tons of glue sticks. So what I do is I use this, and let me turn the light off for a second so you can see. I use this Scotch, and it says permanent, but it's not permanent with fabric, double-sided roll-on tape. I've also used, I still have it right here, this generic brand I got off of Amazon, and it works beautifully as well to do what we're about to do. But if you purchase a different brand other than one of these, test them on your fabric first. Iron over it and see if it's going to leave a spotty mess. If it does, throw it away and don't use it. But these two, I've not had problems ironing over them, and I iron with steam. I'm full blast all the way. Never had a problem. So what I do is, even though I know I can iron on this, I don't tend to put it in the middle of my piece unless that's the only place I can put it. I want to put a little bit of tape, just a small little smidgen, on the seam allowances, and that actually is a really big piece, but on the seam allowances of my piece. And the reason I don't stick it in the middle is just in case something goes crazy. It's just a precaution, but it really doesn't with this brand, so I'm fine. And then what I do is I line this up on my fabric, and it doesn't matter where you put it on the fabric. You can put it in this corner like that cut guide said. You can put it anywhere you want. I always start at the bottom and work my way up, and you'll see that as we go along. It'll make a little bit more sense. But all I have to do is line it up with a straight edge. And so to save myself some time, I'm going to fold this on that sew line. Remember that line we sewed? We're going to sew AD to 2, from 1 to 2. So AD to TE, number 1 to number 2. I'm only worrying about this piece right now. So I'm going to fold it on that line and just place that line somewhere on a straight edge and give myself about a quarter of an inch. Doesn't matter if it's exactly a quarter inch, but close enough. Okay. Now that piece is taped down. It's not going anywhere. Look at that. It's taped down. But if I made a mistake, I could easily remove it and it doesn't damage my fabric. Okay. So let me line that up again. About a quarter of an inch. Tape it down. This is piece one. Now, the next thing I have to do is trim around this and get all this extra fabric off. So let me find where I put my rotary gun. All right, so I want to make sure I don't cut off this gray allowance like we've talked about. So, and your blades are going to get dull because you're cutting paper. I mean, I could go all the way around, but I'm going to cut paper eventually, so might as well just do it, right? So I'm going to cut this and probably need a new blade. I definitely need a new blade. So we're going to change out the blade before we cut the next piece because look at this mess that I'm making. That's okay. I still have my tape on here. Where did I have it? Oh, I had this turned around. Right. So let me stick that back down. And the nice thing about the light board, I don't have it on now. I'll turn it on in a second so you can see, is that I can see to make sure there's enough fabric all the way around the edge of my piece, plus this quarter-inch seam. So I know I've got a quarter-inch seam past the sew line I'm about to sew on. So I'm about to sew on this line between 1 and 2. I've got a quarter-inch seam right here, and I know I have enough fabric all the way around. So this piece, I'm done with this for now. Okay. So what I do is now I look at number 2. What's the next piece I need? And I don't go to number 2 and pull this piece of fabric and put it on next because that takes me time. So what I do is grab my alphabetizer back and scoop this piece under there so I can see all the letters. And I find where is the next fabric starts with the letter T. So I'm going to go find my T's and put it in there. And I'm done with that piece for right now. And now you're probably thinking, well, that's kind of crazy, Deb. But here's what I've learned. When I teach a class, we'll do one block at a time to learn the process. But you guys are hanging out with me for who knows how many hours doing this block of the month. So I'm going to show you the way I do it all the time. And the reason why I do it this way is it is faster for me. By the time I go all the way through this alphabet, 3 times, I'm pretty much done with all of the pieces. And so I'm really only having to touch each piece of fabric 3, maybe 4 times. So to me, this is a much faster way of getting through all my pieces. And because I teach classes and I want to make as many samples as possible, I need to be faster. And this has helped me to be faster. Plus, the other things helps me do is I'm not miscutting my fabric. So a lot of people pre-cut their fabric. And if that's what you want to do, you do you. And I'm perfectly fine with that. But I don't pre-cut fabric, and I don't teach my students in my classes to pre-cut fabric because what happens if they cut this? And in fact, we've gotten emails at the Legit Kit office this week of I followed someone else that pre-cuts their fabric. I've pre-cut all my pieces, but they're not big enough. So I quit teaching that way because I want people to have the right size piece and not have to rip it out and not have to recut. Now, if you have to recut, not a problem. You're going to have enough fabric. Look at all this I have left over. Okay, you're going to have enough fabric. But if you don't have enough fabric, Legit Kits will just send you another piece of fabric or another pattern piece, whatever you need. So don't worry about messing up. You're not going to really mess up that they can't fix. But I don't pre-cut pieces because then we end up ripping them out if they don't fit or they're turned the wrong way. And it just causes a lot of problems initially until you really know what you're doing. So I do it this way, and this is how I make all my quilts. All right, so I'm finished with this. I can take the cut guide, the fabric, set it aside. I'm not going to need it anymore for month 1. All right. So now when I look at my binder, there's no more pattern pieces here. So I can flip on to B. There's no pattern pieces here. C, there's no pattern pieces for me yet. There's nothing in D. Finally, when I get to E, I have a piece. So this piece right here, number 1, that's the piece we're worrying about, is EX. So let me find my EX fabric. Let me find my EX cut guide. Let me set this aside just because there's not a lot of space under the camera. All right, so remember, we're worrying about this piece, okay? This piece number 1 is EX. And again, look at us. We only have this one piece. So I'm just really verifying. Do I have A1D, A1D? Yes, I do. I'm done. I can mark that off. I no longer need that cut guide. All right, so the same thing. I'm going to put just a little bit of glue behind this seam line. Oh, not that seam line. Good thing I was paying attention behind this seam line for piece 1. Okay, so let me fold it over because I'm having some glow from my light. It's on low, not high. I can see it. So let me just put a little dab of glue there. And then it doesn't matter which line I line it up. I'm going to cut the other 2 sides. So this seems to be long. I'm going to lay it here, make sure that I have a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, and just press that down. Now you can see, and let me see a little bit brighter. So my hands are dark, but you can see what's happening here on the screen. You can see past this line right here, I have a 1/4 inch. I also need a 1/4 inch on this side. Okay, and this is actually the next piece I'm going to use. So I'm going to fold this back, take my add a 1/4 ruler, and I'm going to trim this side. Okay, so now I'll cut this side nice and pretty, and there's no 1/4 inch needed over here. We don't have a sew line here. We just have the seam allowance. So I can just knock that off just like that. I no longer need this fabric. Remember, we only had one piece cut out of it, so I can set it aside. Now this piece 1 is done. You can see I've got a 1/4 inch here. I've got a 1/4 inch here. I'm ready to then put this in the next letter, which is number 2 would be DK. Right. So I'm going to take this again, stick it under D. And actually, if I wanted, because I was just under E, I could go ahead and do piece 2 here if I wanted, but I want to keep this process going all the way through the alphabet for you. So it makes sense, right? So nothing else under E, F, nothing. Oh, look, here we go. G, piece number 1 is GS. So I'm going to find my GS fabric right here. My GS cut guide. Again, we only have one piece of fabric we're cutting out of. So nice. We're going to be done with this fabric in no time. All right, so I'm just going to verify A1B. Yes, this is A1B, so I can mark that off. I'm done with this cut guide. I no longer need it. Okay. Now, this piece is the one I need. So I'm going to put a little bit of tape on both sides in that seam allowance. It's a teeny tiny dab, doesn't need a lot. And I'm going to take this long line here. We're folding between 1 and 2. I'm going to line it up somewhere with the straight edge. Now, if I line it up here, I want you to see this. It will fit, but it will be a tight squeeze because I need a 1/4 inch over here, and I want to make sure I get all of this point. Okay, so I want to make sure I get this whole point, and it would fit. It'll be a squeeze, but if I just turn this and use this side, it's a long side. I can put it there, have my 1/4 inch seam right here, and then now I'm just going to cut here and here to have my piece. And that's probably should scoot it over a tad. That wasn't quite a 1/4. And it's okay if it's not exactly a 1/4. It's not going to matter. Okay. But then we got enough room there. So I'm going to trim here. Trim here. Be careful when you're coming back to yourself. Not the best practice there. Oops. Oh, I still did not change my blade. Okay. And I actually cut off that sticker a tiny bit, so I'm just going to pull that off. There we go. All right, so I know all my seam allowance is covered. I've got extra hanging off on both sides. And this next sew line, if I fold that back, has a 1/4 inch. So I'm finished with this piece. What is piece number 2? AC. So I'm gonna grab my binder, flip open my A, plop it in there. I don't need to worry about that piece anymore, and I'm done with this fabric. If I weren't done, I'd just file it back in. But we're done. We're gonna set it aside. So that was G. We have nothing in H. We have fabric in I, but no pieces. So I'm going to just keep going till I get to the next section that has a piece. Okay. So one more time, I'm going to show you, and then I'll just continue on doing for the rest of piece one. And then we'll come back and say, what in the world do we do piece two? But we're only worrying about piece one. Now, this is a little bit of an interesting one. LW. So let me pull the fabric for that. And let me pull the cut guide for that. And we are going to use these again because if you look on your cut guide, there are two pieces that I need. So this is piece A to E, and we're going to do piece number one. So I'm going to look A to E, and that number one in the parentheses means it's piece number one. So I have the right fabric, the right cut guide. I'm going to cross off A to E. We still will have to come back for this piece. So we're not done with this fabric or this cut guide yet. But if we look at this piece, there's really no seam allowance around it. We're going to sew on all three sides. So on this one, I have no choice but put a little bit of tape right there in the middle of that guide. And then I'm going to take my sew line 1 and 2, fold, and just line it up, put it on top of my fabric, and line it up somewhere where I can have a 1/4 of an inch. So I have a 1/4 of an inch on this side. You can see by looking at this, I have fabric all the way around this piece. So I'm good to go. So I'm going to fold back on each of my sew lines and do a 1/4 inch cut. So that one, I'm going to fold back on this one. Because all we're worrying about right now is just getting piece one cut out and put on our piece. That's it. That's all we're worrying about. Don't cut towards you like me. And if you have cut-proof gloves, not a bad thing. All right. So let's see. There we go. Cut a little extra there. So you're just going to want to watch that and make sure you don't put a piece over that next time. But you got plenty of fabric. All right. So I'm going to put it both of these back in my alphabetizer under the letter L. And if I look at my piece, I have a 1/4 inch seam all the way around on all three of these sew lines. Okay. But where am I going to file it? What's piece number 2? Let me turn this down. Piece number 2 is RQ. So let me grab. And normally I'm not going back and forth. I have it all right here beside me. I usually have cutting and ironing on one side, my folder on the other side, and I just kind of swish all around. But for camera's sake, we're a little bit crowded. But RQ, here's R, drop it in there. I'm ready to go. I think that was the letter L. Yep, so I put my piece back in here. Now we're moving right along. Okay. So what I want you to do is to continue doing that same thing. I'm going to do so here, but I got a lot of pieces back here that are in the N's and the O's. Okay, so there's a lot of N's and O's. You saw we had lots of N's and O's fabric. So I'm just going to do this process. And when I have a lot of fabric in here, what I'll usually do is sort them by letter. So number 1 is OZ. So that's going to be my OZ pile. This is OP. There's an OP pile. ON. Oh, that's a Q. So it's not even in the right space. So QC should be back here with the Q. So let me just throw that there. OH. This is OX. I don't think I have an OX pile yet. Nope. And then this one is ON. So I do have another ON. So I have 2 ONs and everything else is 1. So I sort them out like this, and then I'll just kind of start maybe like in alphabetical order and kind of go through my list. So here's my pieces. Number 1 is OH. Let me grab OH and the cut guide. And remember I told you, being honest, I don't always mark these off. But I will say it is nice when you do, because if you get finished and you still have fabric and a cut guide in your alphabetizer, then you know, oh, you forgot a piece somewhere. And that has happened to me before. And that's the only way I figured it out before I sewed the thing together. So it's kind of nice to mark them off. So if you're starting, I would definitely say go that route. I don't always do it. All right, I'm going to find my O8. OH, there's only one. Is it piece A1G? Let's see, where did I put it? It is piece A1G. So I can mark this off. And when I'm done with this fabric, cutting piece one, I'm done. Okay, so let me scoop that over. We got plenty of room here to work. Put my glue right here. Put my piece on. And then we're going to cut that up. Change your blade, Deb. All right, this piece is done. This is done as well. Now, because I have my alphabetizer all open over here, it's kind of a hot mess. I'm just going to set this aside. And when I finish all these O pieces, then I will come back and file them where they go. Right. So this one, ON had two pieces. So our other piece is A2B. A2B, number one is ON. So I can mark that off. And now actually I will be done with this piece after I cut this out. So I no longer need that anymore. And now, since this is our second piece that we're doing out of this fabric, I want to show you what I do. All right, let's look at this piece because it's the first time we've had to cut another piece out of a piece of fabric we've already used. Okay, so I've already got the tape on. I need to fold it on my next sew line. So between 1 and 2, I'm going to fold it there. And I'm going to align it somewhere where there's a nice clear edge. But I want to show you something. If I line it up here, that's not going to work because look, my piece is sticking off this fabric. So I can line this up either on line 2 or 3 because I'm going to cut both of these off anyway. So if I fold it over and I give myself a 1/4 of an inch on this line, what I need to do is look and see, do I have this blue fabric all under this ON piece? And I do if I line it up here. Okay, so that works. And then I'm going to fold this on my next line. Get my 1/4 of an inch, cut that, and then I can cut all the way. my finder's in the way. All the way across here. Okay. Now, remember, we only had 2 pieces out of this. They're both cut. I've got all this extra fabric. I don't need that. I can just set it to the side. Now, let's look at this piece and see if we did this right. Let me turn the light on for that. So you can see I have blue fabric under this entire piece. It goes off the corner here. I have a 1/4 of an inch here. I've got extra by my seam allowance, and I've got a 1/4 of an inch here. So this piece is now done, and I can set it aside, or because I know piece number 2 is R, I see R right here. I can go ahead, slide it up under there. All right, now we're ready to keep doing that, continuing on the rest of our first pieces. You can see I initially had that one turned the wrong way. What you want to make sure is that the fabric is under your first piece. So I had it turned the wrong way, so I just switched it around. I'm lined up at the bottom. There's my 1/4 inch. I can trim this little guy off. And it has another piece that's coming out of it, so I'm going to keep that filed over here. And that piece is done. Okay, now let's look at this one, because sometimes one of the good things about our cut guides is it shows us orientation. Now, I know that this piece will not fit across here. Okay, so automatically I'm going to put it here. But this is a good time to look at your cut guides to see, is the orientation correct? Am I lining these up the correct way? Because if it did fit down here and I cut it, I may not have enough for this other piece. So there are times like that when that cut guide comes in really handy. And this is A2A, number one. So we're going to use that again. All right, so all of these pieces that I had for my ins and O's are all done, and now I'm ready to file them behind the next piece. So it's sometimes just easier to close my book and then just throw them in where they go. So number two, BF, I'm gonna raise up the B, drop it in. Number two, NS, raise up my N. Oh, we were just there. I could do that next, but we're only worrying about piece one. Only to have piece one, piece one, piece one till we're done. All right, same thing. Number two, PR. Number two here is RQ, and number two is AC. All right, so I'm ready to move on to my next letter. That was NO. Now I'm going to PQ. And for the sake of right now, because we're only dealing with piece one, I'm going to skip piece two. I'm going to come back and we're going to do that next. But we're going to get all of our piece ones done first. Usually when I'm doing this, if this piece is already done, I'll go ahead and go to piece two. But I want to do that fresh with you after we get all of our one. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn this over because I'm waiting on piece two for that one. This one, piece one is QC. So let me find my QC. This one, piece one is P, pepper. All right. So let me cut those out. Let's see. In piece one for pepper, there's only the one. A, A2C, A2C. We're done with this piece. We don't need any longer junking up our alphabetizer, right? All right. So these two pieces are ready to be filed. Number two for NS and number two ME. And now I'm moving on and finishing the rest of my alphabet. So, all right. So if I look in the R's, this one already has piece one. So for now, I'm going to set it aside. As you get better with this and you've done a little more, then you can go ahead and do piece two. But for now, we're only, I had to keep telling myself, only doing piece one. So I'm going to set that aside. This has piece one. I'm setting it aside. This one does not. This piece right here, RQ, has no fabric. So we're going to do that one. So Q, this big guy, and it is P, A18. So A18, piece one, mark that off. We're still going to be using that guy. Well, let me, the big piece of fabric, I'm going to set my alphabetizer aside. Nice thing about having my light is I can see this is 1/4 of an inch even without having to fold it up and look at it. So that's really nice. Doesn't have to be straight, doesn't have to be perfect. This piece is done, so I can put it in QC and I can put this fabric back up. So fabric is back up. This goes in the Q's. That was R, and now we have S. So we're going to keep on going. That first time, yeah. All right, so SV, SV. This is please A1C, not the cholesterol. I think I heard Nina say that too. So Nina and I are a lot alike. You may hear some of the same corny jokes from both of us. So A1C, we're going to turn that over. We're going to use that again. And you can see I'm just lining this up on a straight edge right here. I'll fold down here, cut my 1/4 of an inch, and then I can just go straight off there. Put that back. Oh, QC fabric. I didn't put it up. I think I need it again. So let's look just to make sure. QC, yep, I need that again. It's that back in its little home. And then this one goes to YE. All right, so that was S's. T's, we do have some T's. This one we don't worry about right now because it's piece 1. So I need TQ. So it's this beautiful turquoise color. And CQ. Oh, we're only using it once. So is this piece A28? Yes, it is. Right, and this goes under piece number 2, DN. So right back here, DN. And the reason why I file them right after I cut them is because that one went back in the alphabet. But some of them, as you've noticed, are further along in the alphabet. So when we get to that letter, we would typically do all of our pieces then. So I'll go ahead and file them right after because I may come across them again. There's nothing in V. And if we look in Y, this one has been done. And this one has not. So number 1 is YX. And YX. And we are on piece A1E. A1E, piece number 1. Yep. Well, I'm going to go ahead and fold this up to get it out of the way. And finish our last piece. Now, if you know 1/4 of an inch because you're a seamstress, if you don't want to, or quilter, you don't want to use your ruler every time, you can eyeball it and get 1/4 of an inch. There's no quilt police that's going to say, oh, you didn't use your 1/4 ruler. Some people like to use scissors. So if you can tell 1/4 of an inch, don't worry about it. Just cut it. All right. Number 2 goes to DK. All right. So I'm going to file that piece. And you guys have made it through the alphabet one time. Yeah. Give yourself a pat on the back. That's a big accomplishment.